Today, we're going to explore one of the most fundamental aspects of human life: how people select romantic partners and how they keep them both in the short term and the long term. This is a subject that cuts across psychology, biology, sociology, and neuroscience. It is also something that touches every individual on a personal level. When we talk about human relationships, particularly romantic ones, we are really talking about an intricate system of evolved mechanisms, systems that guide attraction, decision-making, bonding, and long-term stability. These mechanisms are not random. They are shaped by evolutionary pressures, cultural frameworks, and individual experiences. Dr. David Buss, one of the foremost researchers in evolutionary psychology, has spent decades studying these questions. His work provides us with evidence-based insights into why people are drawn to certain partners, how relationships begin, and what factors help them persist or break down. What is remarkable is that much of what we feel in love, attraction, jealousy, desire, or commitment, has deep roots in survival and reproduction strategies. In today's talk, I want to share with you 10 essential principles drawn from the science of human mating and partner retention. Each principle will be explored in depth, supported by research findings, and accompanied by practical protocols, things that you can apply in your own life if you choose. Our focus will be clarity and depth. The goal is not to overwhelm you with trivia, but to give you a systematic framework, a way of understanding your own behavior and the behavior of others. By the end of this talk, you will not just have information. You will have a set of tools and practices that can help you approach relationships with more awareness, more patience, and more resilience. Let's begin with the first key principle. Key point 1. Attraction is rooted in evolutionary preferences. When we think about attraction, we often imagine it as a mysterious force. You meet someone and you feel drawn to them sometimes instantly. But science shows us that attraction is not random. It is guided by deep evolutionary preferences that have been selected over thousands of generations. Research by David Buss and others indicates that men and women, on average, have distinct but overlapping mate preferences. These are not arbitrary cultural constructs. They reflect adaptive challenges faced by our ancestors. For example, across 37 cultures studied by Buss and colleagues, men consistently preferred cues associated with youth and fertility, such as clear skin, facial symmetry, and certain waist-to-hip ratio. Women, on the other hand, consistently valued cues of resource acquisition and long-term stability, such as ambition, intelligence, and the ability to provide. Now, it's very important here not to misinterpret the science. These findings are about average tendencies, not rigid rules. They do not mean that every man is looking for the same physical traits, or that every woman is prioritizing. What they mean is that our species carries psychological adaptations that bias our attention towards certain features, because in ancestral environments, those features increase the probability of survival and reproduction. Let's make this concrete. Imagine a small hunter-gatherer community. For women, choosing a partner who had the strength, skill, and motivation to bring food back to camp would have been critical for her and her children's survival. For men, choosing a partner who was young and healthy enough to bear children successfully would have been equally critical for reproductive success. These pressures left their mark in the form of mate preferences. But how does this play out today in modern industrial societies? We no longer live in small bands of foragers. We have dating apps, global travel, and complex cultural values. Yet, research continues to show the persistence of these evolved preferences. Long-term mating strategies. When we examine human romantic behavior, one of the most fundamental distinctions is between short-term and long-term mating strategies. This distinction is not just cultural. It is grounded in evolutionary psychology and observed across nearly all societies studied to date. Dr. David Buss's research highlights that humans are flexible strategists. Unlike some species that are locked into a single reproductive strategy, humans are capable of pursuing both short-term and long-term relationships, depending on their goals, opportunities, and life circumstances. This flexibility is one of the reasons our species has been so successful. It allows individuals to adapt their mating strategies to changing environments. So what exactly do we mean by short-term and long-term strategies? Short-term strategies are oriented around immediate attraction and relatively brief encounters. They prioritize qualities that are rewarding in the moment: physical attractiveness, sexual availability, social excitement. Long-term strategies, by contrast, are oriented around enduring partnership. They prioritize qualities like reliability, shared values, emotional stability, and the ability to cooperate over decades. Both strategies can make sense, depending on the context. From an evolutionary standpoint, short-term mating can provide genetic diversity, opportunities for new alliances, and immediate gratification. Long-term mating, however, offers stability, cooperative parenting, and resource sharing. The balance between the two is not random. It is influenced by sex, age, environment, and individual differences in personality and goals. For example, studies show that men, on average, report more openness to short-term mating opportunities than women. This is explained by what evolutionary scientists call a differential parental investment. Since women invest more biologically in offspring through pregnancy and lactation, they are, on average, more selective about short-term partners. Men who can reproduce with lower minimum biological investment have evolved a greater willingness to pursue short-term opportunities. But again, these are averages, not absolutes. There are many men who prioritize long-term stability and many women who also engage in short-term strategies when the context favors it. One fascinating finding from Buss's work is that even the same individual may shift strategies over time. A person might prioritize short-term excitement in their 20s, then increasingly seek long-term stability in their 30s or 40s. Life stage, personal goals, and cultural context all shape which strategy feels adaptive at a given moment. Another important point is that these strategies are not mutually exclusive. Many people pursue a hybrid approach. They may engage in short-term relationships while ultimately seeking a long-term partner, or they may maintain a long-term relationship while occasionally being tempted by short-term opportunities. This dual strategy is part of our species' psychological design. Now, what does this mean for you in practical terms? First, it means you should be very clear about which strategy you are pursuing at a given time. Problems arise when expectations are misaligned. If one person is looking for a long-term commitment and the other is only seeking short-term excitement, the science shows that clarity is one of the most important predictors of relationship satisfaction. So a useful protocol here is the practice of a strategy clarification. Before you enter a new romantic interaction, take a moment to ask yourself, am I looking for short-term connection or am I investing in long-term potential? This self-awareness not only helps you avoid mismatches, it also allows you to communicate more honestly with potential partners. David Buss's studies, along with a vast literature in evolutionary psychology, show that men, on average, are more strongly attuned to physical cues of youth and fertility. Women, on average, are also attentive to appearance, but prioritize it differently, often integrating it with cues of resource potential and status. This does not mean women do not value physical attractiveness. It means that across cultures, their mate preferences tend to be more multidimensional. Let's break this down further. What do we mean by health cues? Facial symmetry. Numerous studies have demonstrated that people rate symmetrical faces as more attractive. Symmetry is thought to signal developmental stability, meaning that the individual's genes and environment were robust enough to resist disturbances during growth. In ancestral conditions, this was a reliable indicator of health and genetic fitness. Skin clarity and tone smooth, clear skin is universally rated as attractive. The reason is simple. Skin condition provides immediate information about health, nutrition, and disease status. Even today, our brains are unconsciously tracking these details when we evaluate a face. Body proportions for women, the waist-to-hip ratio of approximately 0.7 has consistently been found to correlate with perceived attractiveness. This ratio is associated with fertility and lower risk of chronic disease. For men, cues like shoulder-to-waist ratio and physical strength are valued as they signal formidability and the capacity to protect and provide. Youth-related cues features like full lips, clear eyes, and hair quality are cues of youthfulness, which in turn signal reproductive potential. Again, these are average trends, not absolute rules. Many long-term pairings thrive beyond youth precisely because human bonding is also built on other traits like trust, cooperation, and shared values. Now, how does this knowledge apply to modern contexts like dating apps, workplaces, or social gatherings? In contemporary life, physical cues are often amplified. Social media and dating platforms emphasize visual presentation, sometimes leading to distortions. People may overemphasize appearance at the expense of other qualities, but the science indicates that ignoring physical cues entirely is unrealistic. They are part of our evolved psychology. The key is to integrate them intelligently with long-term considerations. And one protocol here is the practice of appearance recalibration. This involves recognizing that while initial attraction is often based on appearance, long-term satisfaction depends on a broader set of qualities. A useful exercise is to reflect on past relationships and ask, did the traits that initially attracted me predict long-term happiness, or did other traits, like kindness, reliability, and shared values, end up mattering? By doing this reflection, you recalibrate your own attraction system, giving less weight to cues that predict only short-term appeal. It's also important to recognize that appearance itself is dynamic. Health behaviors, nutrition, exercise, sleep, stress management, directly influence appearance. In that sense, attraction is not just about innate features. It is about choices and habits. Someone who consistently invests in their health is signaling reliability and self-care, both of which are highly valued traits. This brings us to a practical protocol. If you are seeking to enhance your attractiveness, focus not on cosmetic manipulation, but on genuine health behaviors. Regular exercise improves not just body shape, but posture and energy levels. Adequate sleep improves skin, eye brightness, and emotional regulation. A nutrient-rich diet improves hair, skin, and overall vitality. These changes are not superficial. They signal underlying genetic and physiological robustness. Interestingly, the same principle applies when evaluating. Instead of fixating on static traits, pay attention to whether someone demonstrates health-supporting behaviors. Do they maintain active routines? Do they handle stress adaptively? Do they prioritize sleep and nutrition? These behaviors are predictive of long-term vitality and resilience, which are critical for sustaining a partnership. We should also address the psychological dimension. People often feel conflicted about valuing appearance as if it undermines deeper connection. But research suggests that attraction to appearance is not inherently shallow. It is an evolved system for assessing health and fertility. The problem arises only when it becomes the sole criterion. Integrating appearance with psychological and behavioral cues leads to more sustainable choices. From a neurobiological perspective, initial attraction to appearance is largely mediated by dopamine and reward circuitry in the brain. Visual cues activate these pathways rapidly, producing the feeling of a chemistry. Over time, however, sustained attraction requires additional systems, oxytocin, vasopressin, and the prefrontal cortex, coming online to assess compatibility and trust. This means that while appearance may spark interest, it is not sufficient for long-term bonding. One final tool here is what I call the dual lens approach. Whenever you feel a strong pull of attraction based on appearance, deliberately engage a second lens. Ask yourself a beyond attraction. What signals does this person send about cooperation, stability, and long-term alignment? This simple pause engages the prefrontal cortex, shifting you from automatic responses to reflective choice. So to summarize, physical appearance and health cues play a central role in attraction because they signal underlying fitness. These cues are universal, persistent, and biologically grounded, but they must be integrated with long-term predictors of compatibility. By recalibrating your attraction system, practicing health signaling behaviors, and adopting a dual lens approach, you can respect the reality of physical attraction while avoiding the trap of superficial selection. Key point 4, the psychology of resources, status, and security when we examine how humans select and keep partners. One of the most consistently observed themes across cultures is the role of resources and status. These factors, financial stability, social standing, and the capacity to provide security, are deeply embedded in human mating psychology. This is not about materialism or superficial greed. It is about survival. For most of human history, individuals lived in small groups where food scarcity, disease, and external threats were constant realities. In such environments, selecting a partner who could secure resources, provide protection, and signal social competence was directly linked to survival and reproductive success. David Buss's cross-cultural studies involving over 10,000 participants from 37 cultures reveal a striking consistency. Women, more than men, place a higher value on a partner's financial prospects, ambition, and social status. This does not mean that men ignore these qualities. It means that women, on average, have evolved stronger preferences for cues of resource acquisition because the costs of reproduction, pregnancy, lactation, and childbearing are higher for them. Men, by contrast, tend to emphasize youth and physical attractiveness more strongly. Again, these are averages, not absolutes, and individual variation is vast, but the pattern is robust across cultures and reflects evolutionary pressures. So how do resources and status function as signals in modern life? First, resources are not just about money. They include time, energy, social connections, and emotional investment. A partner who is emotionally present, who invests energy into the relationship, and who has strong social networks is often as valuable as one with financial. In fact, research indicates that emotional support is a stronger predictor of long-term satisfaction than raw income. Second, status is multidimensional. In ancestral environments, status might have been measured by hunting skill or influence within the group. Today, it can manifest as career success, community, respect, or creative accomplishment. What matters is not the specific form of status, but what it signals: competence, reliability, and the ability to contribute to the partnership's stability. Third, security is as much psychological as it is material. A partner who creates a sense of safety, who is consistent, trustworthy, and emotionally predictable, provides a form of security that is often more valuable than financial wealth. This is why qualities like dependability and commitment rank among the highest predictors of marital satisfaction. Let's now talk about practical tools. One protocol I recommend is the resource mapping exercise. Take 20 minutes and write down all the resources you bring to a relationship. Include not just financial assets, but emotional skills, social connections, and personal qualities. Then ask, which of these do I consistently invest in my relationships, and which do I neglect? By mapping your resources, you become more intentional about signaling value to potential or current partners. Another practice is reciprocal signaling. Relationships are not one-way streets. Both partners are constantly evaluating each other's investment. If one partner provides financial security but neglects emotional support, the balance is disrupted. Research shows that stable couples engage in reciprocal signaling. Each partner consistently demonstrates investment in the domains most valued by the other. This could mean alternating who handles expenses or balancing career focus with quality time. The key is demonstrating through action that you are willing to share and sustain resources. It's also important to recognize cultural variation. In societies with greater economic equality, women's preferences for male financial resources be somewhat reduced, while other traits such as kindness or shared values increase in importance. This flexibility reflects the interaction between evolved psychology and from a neurobiological perspective, security in relationships engages the brain's threat detection systems. When a partner signals reliability, the amygdala, a brain region involved in detecting threats, shows reduced activation. This creates a sense of calm and stability, mediated by oxytocin and serotonin. In contrast, when a partner is unpredictable or inconsistent, the brain interprets this as a potential threat, increasing cortisol levels and chronic stress. This explains why consistency and reliability are not just psychologically satisfying, but physiologically regulating. A practical bonding tool here is what I call the security protocol. This involves 3 simple but powerful practices. 1, follow through on commitments, no matter how small. 2, communicate expectations clearly. And 3, establish predictable rituals, like weekly check-ins or shared meals. These practices reduce uncertainty, which is one of the greatest sources of relationship stress. Finally, it's important to address a common misunderstanding. Valuing resources or status in a partner does not make someone shallow. It reflects deep evolutionary logic. What matters is how we balance these factors with other traits. A partnership built solely on financial or social gain is unlikely to sustain emotional fulfillment. But ignoring the role of resources altogether is equally unrealistic. The healthiest approach is integration, seeking partners who demonstrate both the capacity to provide security and the willingness to share it in a reciprocal, cooperative manner. Familiarity, meanwhile, creates comfort, safety, and trust. Both are necessary for long-term bonding, but they can pull in opposite directions. Too much familiarity without novelty leads to stagnation. Too much novelty without stability creates instability. Successful couples learn to balance these forces. One of the core findings in this area is that sexual desire is highly context-dependent. For example, research by Marta Mina and others shows that women's sexual desire is strongly influenced by psychological factors like emotional connection, stress levels, and self-perception of attractiveness. Men's desire, while more directly tied to physical cues, is also shaped by context, including stress, fatigue, and relational quality. This means that maintaining passion requires attention not only to the bedroom, but to the entire ecosystem of the relationship. From a neurobiological perspective, 3 systems interact here. The dopamine system linked to novelty, pursuit, and reward. The oxytocin and vasopressin system linked to bonding, attachment, and trust. The testosterone and estrogen system linked to sexual drive and responsiveness. For long-term passion, all 3 need to be activated in balance. Too much reliance on bonding chemistry without novelty can make the relationship feel like companionship rather than passion. Too much pursuit of novelty without bonding undermines trust. One protocol is the novelty injection practice. This involves deliberately creating new experiences with your partner that are not routine. These could be sexual, trying new forms of intimacy, or non-sexual, such as traveling to a new place, learning a skill together, or changing up daily routines. Research shows that novelty activates the same dopamine pathways that are involved in early-stage attraction, refreshing desire. Another practice is the sexual communication protocol. Many couples struggle with declining passion because they avoid talking about their needs, preferences, or fantasies. Studies indicate that couples who communicate openly about their sexual life report higher satisfaction. This doesn't mean constant negotiation. It means periodic check-ins where each partner can express what is working, what could improve, and what they desire more of. This requires vulnerability, but it strengthens both passion and trust. A third tool is the stress reduction practice. One of the biggest killers of sexual desire, especially in long-term partnerships, is chronic stress. Cortisol interferes with testosterone and estrogen production, suppressing libido. Couples who cultivate stress management practices, exercise, mindfulness, relaxation rituals, create a physiological environment where desire can flourish. This is why stress regulation is not just about health. It directly influences sexual chemistry. We should also address the issue of mismatched desire. In many couples, one partner has a higher baseline libido than the other. Research shows this is normal and not inherently a problem. The challenge is how it is managed. Successful couples adopt flexible strategies, sometimes aligning with the higher desire partner, sometimes with the lower desire partner, and sometimes creating alternative forms of intimacy that meet both partners' needs. The key is avoiding shame and blame, and instead framing differences as part of the relationship system that can be negotiated. From an evolutionary perspective, the persistence of sexual desire beyond reproduction is itself fascinating. Unlike many species where mating occurs only during fertile periods, humans maintain sexual activity across the lifespan. This supports the pair bonding hypothesis, the idea that sex evolved, not just for reproduction, but also for long-term cohesion. In this sense, sexual intimacy functions as both a reproductive strategy and a relationship maintenance tool. To put this into a daily practice, consider what I call the intimacy ritual. This is not necessarily about sex every day, but about consistent physical and emotional closeness. This could be cuddling before sleep, affectionate touch in daily life, or moments of uninterrupted eye contact. These micro-rituals maintain oxytocin release and prime the system for sexual desire, while also reinforcing bonding. Finally, we should talk about aging and long-term passion. It is often assumed that sexual desire naturally declines with age. While hormonal changes do occur, research shows that couples who maintain novelty, communication, and health practices can sustain fulfilling sexual lives well into later decades. Passion is not solely a product of youth, it is a product of intentional practice. So to summarize, sexual desire is a complex system involving biology, psychology, and context. It thrives on novelty, but also depends on trust and security. By injecting novelty, practicing open communication, regulating stress, and maintaining intimacy rituals, couples can sustain passion not just in the short term, but across decades of partnership. Key point 7. Conflict, jealousy, and the dynamics of partner retention. When we examine how humans keep romantic partners over time, we inevitably come to the topic of conflict. Conflict is not an exception in relationships, it is the rule. Every long-term relationship involves disagreements, mismatches in desire, differences in priorities, and the inevitable pressures of life. The science is clear. It is not the presence of conflict that determines the success of a relationship, but how that conflict is managed. Conflict reveals much about human psychology. Evolutionary psychology, as Dr. David Buss points out, suggests that jealousy, anger, and possessiveness are not flaws in the human design, but features that evolved to protect relationships from threats, whether from infidelity, neglect, or competing mates. But these mechanisms, while adaptive in ancestral environments, can create destructive cycles in modern relationships if left unchecked. Jealousy is a particularly important example. Studies consistently show that men and women differ on average in what triggers jealousy most strongly. Men tend to be more distressed by sexual infidelity, while women tend to be more distressed by emotional infidelity. The logic is evolutionary. For men, sexual betrayal risks raising another man's offspring, while for women, emotional betrayal risks the loss of a partner's investment and protection. Understanding these differences does not excuse destructive behavior, but it does help us make sense of the strong emotions that arise when threats to the relationship appear. Conflict often emerges when these evolved mechanisms clash with modern expectations of equality, freedom, and autonomy. For example, a partner may interpret jealousy as controlling, while the jealous partner experiences it as protective. Without awareness, this creates escalating cycles of accusation and defensiveness. The science shows that the way forward is not to suppress these emotions, but to bring them into conscious discussion and to develop protocols for managing them. One such protocol is what researchers call the conflict resolution system. This involves 3 steps. 1, identifying the underlying need behind the conflict. 2, expressing it without accusation. And 3, negotiating a solution that addresses both partners. For example, if jealousy arises because one partner feels neglected when the other spends time with friends, the underlying need may be reassurance. The solution is not to ban social activity, but to establish rituals of connection that reaffirm commitment before and after those social events. Another practice drawn from John Gottman's research on long-term couples is the soft startup. Couples who begin difficult conversations with criticism or hostility often escalate into destructive conflict. By contrast, couples who begin with a gentle statement of need, "I feel anxious when we don't spend time together," are far more likely to resolve the issue constructively. This practice rewires the conflict system away from attack and defense toward problem solving. Importantly, conflict can also be an opportunity for growth. Research shows that couples who engage in constructive conflict, where both sides listen, express emotions, and reach compromises, often report greater intimacy afterward. This is because conflict, when navigated well, demonstrates commitment. It says this relationship matters enough to work through discomfort. In this sense, conflict is not a sign of weakness, but a pathway to strength, provided the tools are in place. Jealousy, too, can be reframed. Instead of seeing it solely as a destructive force, it can be understood as a signal. It points to areas of insecurity, unmet needs, or perceived threats. By naming jealousy and exploring its source, whether it is fear of loss, lack of reassurance, or past trauma, couples can use it as information rather than as a weapon. On a neurochemical level, conflict and reconciliation activate powerful systems. During conflict, stress hormones like cortisol surge, narrowing attention and biasing perception toward threat. But when couples successfully repair after conflict through apologies, physical affection, or reaffirmations, oxytocin and dopamine rise, reinforcing the bond. In fact, studies show that couples who repair effectively after conflict often feel closer than before the disagreement. The repair process, not the absence of conflict, predicts long-term success. Practically, this suggests a protocol of a structured repair. After any serious conflict, couples can establish a ritual of reconnection, setting aside time to express what was learned, what will be done differently, and why the relationship matters. This transforms conflict from a destabilizer into a bond strengthener. We should also address aggression and control. While jealousy and anger may have evolutionary roots, they can become destructive when expressed through control, coercion, or violence. The data is clear. Relationships that involve aggression or abuse are profoundly damaging and should not be tolerated. The adaptive mechanisms of jealousy were never designed for environments of equality and safety. Modern partnerships require not only passion and bonding, but also respect, autonomy, and trust. Conflict in long-term partnerships is also shaped by cultural scripts. In some societies, open confrontation is discouraged, while in others, direct expression is valued. Couples must navigate not only their personal temperaments, but also the cultural norms they bring into the relationship. This is why there is no single formula for conflict management, but the universal principles of need recognition, gentle communication, and repair apply across contexts. In practical terms, couples can adopt what I call a jealousy check-in. This is a periodic conversation where partners can share any feelings of insecurity or perceived threats before they escalate into destructive patterns. By normalizing these conversations, jealousy becomes a manageable signal rather than a toxic force. Finally, conflict should be understood not as an obstacle to passion and bonding, but as part of the system of long-term retention. Humans evolved jealousy and anger as protective mechanisms, but we also evolved empathy, communication, and problem-solving. When couples bring these capacities together, conflict becomes not a predictor of breakup, but a catalyst for deeper commitment. So to summarize, conflict is inevitable. Jealousy is natural, but outcomes depend on management. Unlike many mammals, human infants are born highly dependent, requiring years of care. A stable partnership between parents increased survival odds dramatically. This evolutionary reality continues to shape how relationships function in the modern world, but here is where the science provides an important insight. While children can strengthen the bond by deepening commitment, they also introduce stressors that challenge satisfaction. Research shows that marital satisfaction often dips after the birth of the first child. The reason is not lack of love, but the increase in responsibilities, fatigue, financial strain, and reduction in time for couple intimacy. Yet, for couples who adapt well, satisfaction often rebounds as children grow and routines stabilize. Neurobiology also reflects these shifts. During parenting, both men and women show hormonal changes. Mothers experience elevated oxytocin and prolactin, supporting bonding and caregiving. Fathers also show increased oxytocin and, in some studies, reductions in testosterone, which may support nurturing behaviors. This hormonal rebalancing suggests that humans are biologically prepared to adapt to cooperative caregiving. But it also means that sexual desire, personal identity, and couple time can be affected if not intentionally. One protocol that research supports is the division of labor agreement. Couples who share responsibilities equitably whether financial, household, or childcare, report higher relationship satisfaction. This doesn't mean identical division, but rather a system that feels fair to both. When one partner perceives chronic imbalance, resentment accumulates, which is one of the strongest predictors of long-term dissatisfaction. Another practice is the protected couple time rate. Even in the midst of parenting demands, couples who preserve dedicated time for themselves maintain stronger bonds. This can be as small as 20 minutes of conversation at the end of the day, or as structured as a weekly. The key is intentionality, time that is not about logistics, not about parenting strategies, but about the relationship itself. Neuroscience shows that shared attention and novelty, even in small doses, can refresh the dopamine system and sustain the couple bond amidst daily stress. Family dynamics extend beyond parenting. In-laws, extended family, and cultural expectations all shape the couple system. In evolutionary terms, kin provided crucial support for raising children. But in modern contexts, extended family involvement can sometimes create tension. Research shows that couples who establish clear boundaries with extended family while also maintaining healthy connections report less conflict. The ability to negotiate family roles is a critical skill for long-term stability. Parenting also highlights the importance of values alignment. Couples often assume shared values until they face real-life decisions. Discipline styles, education choices, cultural traditions, and financial priorities for children. When values diverge sharply and remain unaddressed, conflict escalates. But when couples engage in proactive conversations about values, they develop a shared parenting philosophy that reduces friction. Another important scientific insight is the intergenerational transmission of relationship behaviors. Children learn how to relate by observing their parents. Couples who manage conflict constructively, express affection openly, and maintain loyalty provide a relational blueprint for the next generation. In this sense, long-term partnerships are not just about two people, they shape the relational futures of their children. This creates a strong motivational framework. Working on the partnership is not only for the couple's well-being, but for the resilience of the entire family system. From a stress perspective, parenting creates chronic demand. Sleep deprivation, financial pressure, and reduced autonomy all increase cortisol. Physical activity, nutrition, and cognitive engagement not only extend lifespan, but also improve relational quality. Couples who adopt health behaviors together, exercising, preparing healthy meals, practicing stress management, report stronger bonds. This is because health is not only an individual resource, but a shared system. The well-being of one partner directly affects the other, especially in long-term unions. One practice supported by research is the shared growth protocol. Couples who continue to pursue new goals together, whether learning, volunteering, or creative projects, report higher satisfaction and lower risk of relational stagnation. Growth fosters novelty and purpose, both of which sustain long-term passion. Another practice is the legacy conversation. As couples age, discussing meaning, values, and the future becomes central. These conversations deepen intimacy by shifting the partnership from day-to-day logistics to the larger narrative of life. Studies show that couples who reflect together on legacy, what they want to leave for family, community, or each other, report higher emotional closeness and resilience. Conflict also takes on a different shape in aging couples. Research by Laura Carstensen on socio-emotional selectivity theory shows that as people age, they prioritize emotional harmony over conflict. Older couples tend to fight less about trivial issues and focus more on maintaining closeness. This emotional wisdom is a powerful stabilizer. It suggests that time horizon influences how people approach relationship maintenance. Another key element in aging relationships is caregiving. When one partner experiences illness or decline, the other often takes on caregiving role. While this can be stressful, studies show that caregiving also activates bonding systems and can increase meaning in the relationship, provided support and balance are present. Couples who plan ahead, discussing healthcare, responsibilities, and emotional needs, navigate this stage with more resilience. Spirituality and shared worldview also become more prominent in later life. Many couples find that shared belief systems, whether religious or philosophical, provide grounding. These shared frameworks offer not only meaning, but also practices, rituals, community involvement that reinforce bond. Finally, the science of long-term relationships points to one clear theme. Love evolves. It begins with passion and novelty. It deepens through trust and commitment. It is tested through parenting and conflict, and it matures into companionship, meaning, and life. Couples who embrace this evolution rather than resisting change report the greatest resilience. So, to summarize, aging is not the end of passion, but a transformation of it. While novelty-seeking systems may quiet, bonding systems strengthen. Couples who maintain health, pursue shared growth, engage in legacy conversations, and adapt to caregiving roles not only preserve their relationships, but often find deeper fulfillment than in earlier decades. Love, in its evolved form, is not only about attraction, but about enduring partnership across the arc of life. Conclusion as we conclude. Let's take a step back and reflect on what we've covered. We set out to understand how humans select and keep romantic partners in both the short term and the long. Across this journey, we examine the foundations of attraction, the role of mate preferences, the neurochemistry of bonding, the balance between novelty and familiarity, the challenges of conflict and jealousy, the protective role of commitment and loyalty, the impact of parenting and family dynamics, and finally, the evolution of love across the decades of life. The science is clear. Romantic relationships are not simply emotional accidents. Biological, psychological, and behavioral that evolve to solve adaptive problems. These systems are powerful, but they are also malleable.